The essence of saṃyama. The term saṃyama is mentioned in the 3rd chapter of Yoga Sutras. In no other text of yoga, and indeed of Hinduism in general, this term is no longer mentioned. Given the importance of the concept of saṃyama in Raja Yoga, as well as the fact that its equivalent is the second, after shamatha, most important method of modern Buddhism, vipashyana, the Yoga Sutras turn out to be not only the most significant text of yoga, but also the only one in which the teaching yoga is presented in its entirety. Saṃyama is translated from Sanskrit as holding together, binding, gathering, or union. This is the combined practice of dharana, concentration, dhyana, meditation, and samadhi, deep continuous meditation, as follows from stanza 3.4 of Yoga Sutras, which defines saṃyama. In fact, saṃyama begins with dharana, that is, with paying attention to a particular topic, the issue or object under consideration, but immediately passes through the stage of dhyana, that is, a volitional cessation of the usual thought process, to a state of samadhi with a transition to qualitative purity, absence of thoughts, and clarity, collectedness, of the mind manas, manamaya kosha, that is, to actually exclude this low level, compared to vijnanamaya kosha and anandamaya kosha, cognitive tool with its noise of chewing thoughts, and their distorting interpretations from the process of direct awareness. This distortion is inevitable when moving to the level of mental labels and concepts instead of perceiving the immediate essence of things, using that new incredibly perceptive and incredibly powerful toolkit of consciousness, vijnanamaya kosha/buddhi, and anandamaya kosha/sambhogakaya, which will gradually develop as a result of many years of daily many hours training of samadhi due to the energy effect of this psychotechnique. Ordinary thinking is not used in saṃyama, which follows from the requirements of samadhi. The extreme brevity of the descriptions of dharana, dhyana, samadhi, and saṃyama in Yoga Sutras, one short line for each of the 4 terms, leaves a lot of room for different interpretations. However, such conciseness is characteristic of all the sutras of Hinduism, for example, for the Brahma Sutras. It goes without saying that saṃyama is, in principle, impossible without first achieving a high-quality state of samadhi for many hours, just as vipashyana is impossible without first achieving a 3-hour shamatha. The only question that remains open is how high quality the saṃyama will be for the first time upon reaching a 3-hour, or 5-hour, samadhi, and whether it will be necessary to additionally practice many hours of samadhi. This primarily in energy exercise, daily for 6 months or even decades to develop new incredibly perceptive and incredibly powerful cognitive tools that will allow to perform saṃyama easily and quickly. Looking ahead, it can be noted that a comparison with the results of the practice of shamatha by individual prominent Buddhist monks in sub-chapter 3.2 shows that a one-time achievement of many hours of samadhi is not enough. It will take some more long time of daily practice of such samadhi, so that as a result of the energy effect of this practice, those same new one's cognitive tools will develop. In addition, judging also by the experience of Swami Rama, who, thanks to the Shaktipat of his holy guru, could spend 9 hours in samadhi in a row, although the question of the quality of such samadhi bestowed by Shaktipat remains open, as well as the question of the regularity of his practice, but did not demonstrate the presence of superconsciousness and ashta-siddhi, although he had some small siddhis. Gaining the ability to perform full-fledged saṃyama most likely requires many years' daily practice of many hours of samadhi, especially if such a long samadhi was achieved too quickly, for example, through Shaktipat. In other words, the practice of samadhi/shamatha is most likely a practice for the accumulation of energy, and the spiritual transformation of consciousness caused by it. It is possible that with a relatively slow gradual and, importantly, long-term improvement in the quality and duration of samadhi, these meditative trainings themselves can lead to the formation of new incredibly perceptive and incredibly powerful cognitive tools approximately when, for example, the 5-hour duration of genuine samadhi is trained. Examples of some saṃyamas with their incredible results are given in sub-chapter 2.1.1, and a complete list of them can be found in the 3rd chapter of Yoga Sutras. Possible reference to the use of saṃyamas in Uddhava Gita. Although the term saṃyama does not appear explicitly, apart from Yoga Sutras, in no other classical text of yoga in particular and Hinduism in general, nevertheless, something similar to saṃyama is mentioned in chapters 2 to 4 of Uddhava Gita. It is one of 3 texts with Krishna's philosophical dialogues, along with Bhagavad Gita and Anu Gita. In Hinduism, the Uddhava Gita is traditionally considered more yogic-oriented than the Bhagavad Gita, which is for everyone. Chapters 2 to 4, which are chapters 7 to 9 of Skanda the 11th of the Bhagavata Purana, also known as Srimad Bhagavatam, describe the 24 Avadhuta teachers of Dattatreya. The following are his words from the 2nd chapter of the Uddhava Gita. 32. I have many teachers, O king, to whom I turn my mind, Buddhi in original, and from whom I learned wisdom, all the while wandering the earth. Hear about them. 33. Earth, air, sky, water, fire, moon, sun, dove, python, sea, moth, bee, elephant. 34. Honey collector, deer, fish, tortoise and pingala, osprey, child, maiden, arrow maker, snake, spider, and one insect known as Brahmarikita. 35. They, O king, are the 24 teachers to whom I addressed. Studying their characteristic traits of behavior, I learned all my lessons. Although such learning from, for example, air is not verbally possible, it can, of course, still be explained by logic and insight. But, given that we are talking about one of the greatest personalities of Hinduism, Dattatreya, who was the teacher of Shiva, then it is possible that saṃyama was used here, the explicit mention of which disappeared during the repeated retelling of this ancient story. In addition, the Sanskrit text uses the word buddhi, a term referring to the vijnanamaya kosha, in the space of meanings of which there are the meanings of insight and intuition, and not manas, corresponding to the ordinary reasoning mind. Separately, it can be noted that, although the description of meditation is given in the fundamental writings of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, in the Bhagavata Purana, for example, in the 9th chapter of the Uddhava Gita contained in the 11th book of this Purana, and in the 5th Vilasa, in stanzas 69 to 71 and on, of Hari Bhakti Vilasa of Sanatana Goswami, in fact, its practice is almost always ignored by the followers of this teaching, and replaced by japa, rituals, etc. At the same time, in some religious movements that arose one way or another on basis of Gaudiya Vaishnavism, its teaching can also be significantly replaced by own ideas and views of the next preacher, as happened in the case of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, in which the practice of samadhi meditation itself is not welcomed at all and therefore is completely absent, and in Prabhupada's translation of Bhagavad Gita as it is those places where the word samadhi is used in a very specific sense of the practice of meditation are replaced by text-distorting formulations about devotional service, etc. Comparison of yogic samyamas with Buddhist vipashyana. The importance of considering the samyamas given in the text of Yoga Sutras is not so much in describing each of them separately with the results they provide, but in being able to draw an analogy between them and Buddhist vipashyana. Both samyamas and vipashyana are practiced after achieving samadhi and shamatha, respectively, and many Buddhist teachers do not distinguish between shamatha and the term samadhi, which is also used in Buddhism. Both saṃyama and vipashyana serve the same purpose. They lead to the acquisition of prajna, that is, transcendental spiritual wisdom, as described in stanzas 1.49 and 3.5 of Yoga Sutras. This analogy between saṃyamas and vipashyana leads to an important conclusion regarding the essence of the practices of Buddhism. The fact is that in Buddhism there is a widespread erroneous opinion that vipashyana can supposedly be practiced before reaching the 3-hour duration of shamatha. Many authoritative teachers of Tibetan Buddhism, as well as the texts of the Pali Canon, for example in Mahamalakya Sutta, Majjhima Nikaya 64, point out the fallacy of this approach. Comparison of saṃyamas with vipashyana makes it possible to clarify its essence. Of course, we can say that at present the concept of vipashyana in Tibetan Buddhism has some additional interpretation, when, in addition to the classical intuitive insight, it also means the usual analytical process of thinking and reflection, for example, on the teachings of the Buddha, performed through the ordinary mind manas, especially in Gelug. But the problem here is that different teachers of Buddhism, because of this, put different meanings into the same concept of vipashyana, vipassana, which in early Buddhism was generally interpreted as higher, or divine, vision, not related to the mental activity of the mind manas. More details about the essence of vipashyana will be in the video about it. Buddhism is known to have inherited its practices from Hindu yoga. This was repeatedly stated, for example, by the head of Tibetan Buddhism, the Dalai Lama XIV, and the first ever Prime Minister of the government of Tibet in exile, Samdong Rinpoche V. In Raja Yoga, saṃyama is not some kind of separate psychotechnique. This is just the application of consciousness towards various goals of attention, which has reached an incredible power of unshakable concentration, and also, due to energy practice, has developed new incredibly perceptive and incredibly powerful cognitive tools, Vijnanamaya kosha and Anandamaya kosha, through which, apparently, there is such an awareness of everything new. These goals can be both certain physical objects, and concepts and ideas, for example, the empty nature of the mind. Considering the place of samyamas in the practice of yoga, their essence and method, which completely coincide with the place, essence and method of vipashyana in the practice of Buddhist Dharma, Buddhist teachings, we can draw an important conclusion that even when comparing Buddhism with Raja Yoga, vipashyana is not so much a separate psychotechnique, but the application of new structures of consciousness developed in the process of shamatha practice in relation to certain goals. And therefore, a full-fledged vipashyana is impossible without first achieving a 3-hour shamatha. This will be discussed in more detail in subchapter 3.2. The practice of samyamas does not have any separate method apart from the actual practice of samadhi, and perhaps that is why Patanjali did not single out saṃyama as a separate, for example, 9th stage, or limb, of yoga. This is similar to how, in the original Theravada, the vipashyana method was not discussed as a separate psychotechnique, but only in the context of applying the practice of shamatha, itself. In Buddhism, vipashyana is also not included in a separate, for example, the 9th stage of the Noble Eightfold Path, which ending with the 8th stage right samadhi. It should also be noted that any mental reasoning about the essence of saṃyama is meaningless without practicing the incredibly difficult and extremely rare genuine many hours of samadhi. This publication is adapted excerpts from subchapter 2.3 saṃyama of chapter 2 Meditation in Raja Yoga, Dhyana, Samadhi, and saṃyama of my book Meditation in Raja Yoga, Buddhism and Neurophysiology, a practical guide. You can learn more about real meditation practice in Raja Yoga and Buddhism, as well as the use of neuro headsets in meditation practice, from my book.